So the materials that you can use to run an IR, if you have a solid sample that you want to get an IR of, so today this is benzoin and it's a solid, right? Versus if you had a liquid that you were going to try and run an IR on. Anytime you have solid, which is a powder, normally what you're going to do is you're going to pull out one of these mortar and pestles. There's 2 or 3 of them in here. This box is simply meant to keep your potassium bromide dry. You don't want this absorbing water, so most of this stuff is all stored in this large desiccator. So that's the potassium bromide. So the basic idea is, and we'll do that in another video clip shortly, you take some potassium bromide, you weigh out a small amount, you put it in your mortar, you add in a tiny amount of your solid, and then you'll be grinding it up. And the trick here is now you want to stick it into one of these dies. At the moment we have these 2. I just want to go over real quick the slight difference between them. The first thing that you basically want to do though before you get to those dies is you look at these steel pellets, okay? The basic idea of these steel pellets, and all of these 5 right here, or all of them, they're standard as far as the diameter, and they fit in these holes in your die. But when you look at this, there's always a very nice shiny side, and then the other side, and this one for example has a B written on it. So all this means is you find 2 of these. The ones I have now say B and, here I find it, B and T, and the 2 shiny surfaces. What you want to do is put them in the die. So put one in first, dump in your powder on top of it, and then this other one will sit on it. The 2 shiny surfaces will sandwich your powder, and then you're going to squish it together to make a solid, almost like a thin plate of plastic-like glass or something like that. So what you'll do is you'll take these dies when they're put together, you'll drop one of them in first, right? And normally you're not supposed to use your fingers, so the idea is you can wipe them with a Kim wipe, use a clean steel utensil to sort of have one of them drop in. You can just kind of tap that a bit. Sometimes they stick a little bit and then they drop down. You'll dump your powder in, and then you'll put the other one on top of it, shiny. And then you want to get one of these pistons, okay? And right now we have a total of 3 of them. One is short, and then the other 2 are pretty much the same length. The difference between these 2 though, one of them has a slightly beveled edge here, and this one here is very much a sharp edge, 90 degrees. So what I normally do is this. I have 2 dies, and whichever one I'm using, I might say, okay, I'll try and put this one in here. Well, that fits really easy. This one fits in here really easy. If I had picked this other one up first, well, it kind of fits in here quite tightly. This one, it fits in a little bit looser. So normally you pick whichever one of the 2 seems to fit nice and easy into the die you're using. And then at that point, we'll be taking that into the press. And we'll get to that when we make an actual sample. So this is basically how the dies work. The difference between the 2 dies though, there is a difference here. This die, when you take it, when you're done squishing it, and you're going to take this apart, your pellet will still be inside here, and we'll show you later how we're going to push it out. But notice how when you take this apart and you turn it over, that this is very flat. So when you go to put this into the press, you're going to put a piston in the bottom. You're going to put this in the press, and then you're going to have this get pushed up. But notice how this is a perfectly flat top. So in the past, what we used to do was try and find something to put on either side so that we had some clearance in the press to push the pellet up. It's kind of clunky fooling with things like that. So what we've done for this die is you see this piece of copper pipe that sits over top, and it leaves you clearance inside. So this, when you're done squishing your potassium bromide, you'll stick this in your press, crank the handle, and this piston will rise up. So we'll demonstrate that later. So the copper pipe fits very nicely for this die. The other die, which is slightly smaller, this one sort of already comes this way. When you take it apart, turn it over, and you're going to use this. You're going to put this in the press, and you're going to slowly bring this up. Well, notice how this has space inside already. So this one here is all ready to go. You put it in the press. The only trick with that is when you're slowly cranking this up, you'll reach a point where the die, when it gets loose, wants to fall. So that's why you always hold on to this and this at the same time in the press. Doesn't take much pressure. Crank it up so this slowly rises up. Don't let it fall. Okay? So these are the two dies. And this is the materials that you're going to use for solid samples and potassium bromide. If you have a liquid sample, this is a lot easier, and most students get so used to this. Notice how what we have here is a squeeze bottle of methylene chloride or dichloromethane. This beaker is just a rinsing beaker for the waste. So what we have is you're either going to see some containers in here. One is the square plastic, or this one, and inside you're going to find sodium chloride salt plates. All it is sodium chloride pressed into what looks like almost a piece of glass, right? This one here has some older ones that are even some cracked pieces. These cracked pieces, so long as you can get some sample on it and put it in the holder, as we'll show you, it'll work great. So, first thing you're going to do, let me take a look, make sure we can still see this here. First thing you're going to do on these salt plates, with gloves on for you folks. The thing about these containers too, and I should say this now, is when this lid is tight, on certain days with air pressure, you'll see this liquid shooting out and spewing out, right? So whenever you're done with this, normally you open the lid just a little bit so that it doesn't do that, okay? So when you go to use it, you tighten the lid with gloves on, and you're gonna squirt this on both sides to rinse it. And either with a paper towel or a Kim wipe is much better. A Kim wipe, you can lightly dry these off, set them down, and then all you're gonna do is with a disposable pipette, if you have a liquid sample, my rule of thumb is this. I have my 2 salt plates, okay? Take out 1 or 2 drops in the pipette. Just drop 1 single drop into the center of your salt plate. Take your other salt plate, gently squish it down. You now have a sandwich of 2 salt plates with 1 drop in the middle, and you can squish it relatively flat, and then you can load it on to this holder that holds it like this. There is another device that has nuts on it that can tighten this down. For qualitative purposes and for the speed of it, this is the trick. You can start off with 2, run a quick scan of your sample. If you see that your strongest absorptions are flatlined at the 0% transmittance, you can quickly take this out, and this is the other trick. What I'll do is see how they're together. I'll firmly hold it down and I'll smear it apart. I look at the one that looks like it has a thinner film of liquid still on it, if it's not volatile, and I'll place that in here. So now I only have 1 salt plate with a thinner film of the liquid on it, and I'll run that. And even if that is still way too concentrated, the other trick I'll do is I'll take a Kim wipe, or even with the appropriate glove material, I'll lightly wipe it to try and cast a thinner film of the liquid on here and try it again. And it's so rapid and easy to do with the liquid that it's great. So, and as far as your the thing that will hold your, and I better get this out real quick. So to summarize this section, potassium bromide, the pellets, the dyes, the mortar, the pestle with your solid sample, it's a longer process, and when you're done, you can see here, this is the device that holds, and you can see right there, this is an example of your nice potassium bromide pellet. This is the holder for it, and this is the stuff for liquid samples.